What is up, learners? Welcome to this very exciting video that is called Interrogating a Text. And in this video, you will learn what happens in great discussions. What happens in great discussions. And we are going to go from the bottom down. So pause this video as you need to get your notebook set up like this, because we are going to move fast and I am going to limit myself absolutely to no longer than 15 minutes of me talking and taking notes on some pretty sophisticated concepts. So let's get right down to it. The ultimate destination for a conversation about a text is usually some kind of a statement about its theme. The theme is what matters most. It's what comes out of a text, particularly pieces of literature. They're like the deeper meanings. Usually a theme. So like if you wanted to use an example, you could say like lots of different religious traditions have their holy texts, and the Christian tradition has got the Bible. And if you were to say like, well, what's the big deal about the Bible? And somebody said, well, you know, it's a bunch of stories about different things, and then people did some stuff, and I guess that's what it's about. Most Christians would disagree with you vehemently that that is in fact what the Bible is about. They would say there's a much deeper meaning to the Bible. And that is how we look at our great works of literature as well. We would call those great works of secular literature, which is doesn't necessarily have to be about religion for something to have a deep meaning. And these thematic truths, I'm going to write that word down with a capital T, because when it comes to theme, we're usually talking about some deep truth which applies to the human, what we call the human condition. The human condition is like, well, we are humans, so we are stuck in this world being humans, and so certain things are difficult to deal with. One of them being something like disappointment. So I'm going to start drawing these little arrows coming out of here in a different color. One of them being disappointment. So all human beings at some point in their lives are going to deal with disappointment. That's the kind of thing when we're talking about the human condition. And it looks like the green is not visible. So I'm going to switch to blue, like disappointment. That feeling when you wanted to get something awesome and you thought it was going to be great, and instead you did not get something awesome. You got last year's fidget spinner. That's what you got. Sorry. So disappointment, the idea of disappointment. So let's say I wanted a Xbox One for Christmas and I got a fidget spinner. I would be experiencing a very specific disappointment in that moment. But disappointment by itself is actually what we call an abstract concept. An abstract concept, we'll have another workshop on those. Abstract concept. We will be talking about those more in a different video. But a theme is usually some kind of a truth statement about an abstract concept like disappointment. Like a possible theme statement could be disappointment is people grow through disappointment, could be one. But other abstract concepts that usually have to do with themes, I'm just going to start drawing them around here. Courage, a deep, true statement about courage, or trust, or innocence. Innocence is a concept, or love. These are abstract concepts. If you're talking about how you love your parents, that's a very specific instance of love. But if you're talking about the idea of love, it's an abstract concept. And so is loneliness. And so is suffering. And so is family. So these are the kinds of things that great stories are about. And the purpose of reading the story outside of entertainment is to get as much as you possibly can from the story. That's why we use that word interrogating. You're asking questions so you can get absolutely everything of value from reading the story. Honesty is one of them. Wisdom is another. What about maturity? What about change? And when I talk about like an abstract concept and a truth, so if you took something like change, well, maybe an author writes a story, and my ultimate interpretation of that story about what it's all about, I say the theme is that nothing really changes. That's one. That might be an interpretation of this idea of change that an author gets across in a story. But it's not the only one. You could have another author writing a different story that has to do with that concept of change, and they might, their theme might be change is constant. We're always changing. So those are the kind of things that happen in a theme. Now, we can just say, oh, yep, that's the theme, I'm done. But nobody's really going to believe us unless we can prove it. So when you think about a literary analysis, and that's what we're really doing right here, so maybe that's a word that you should write here. Literary analysis. And what I'm talking about here is the grown-up version of literary analysis. This is the kind of thing, you could take this chart with you to college, and everything you read in college, if it's a literature class where you're trying to get the most out of it, it would conform to these same principles. So if we're going to say that something has a certain theme, my reading of this text is that at the root of To Kill a Mockingbird is an examination of courage. And the point that the author is trying to get across is that courage comes in many, many different forms, and courage often doesn't look like courage or doesn't feel like courage to the people who are acting courageously. It's a pretty complex idea. Well, if I'm going to prove to anybody that I actually know what I'm talking about, I'm going to have to do three things. I'm going to have an idea of the author's purpose. I'm going to have an idea of the tone that the author has established, and I'm going to have an idea of the emotional effect that the author was trying to get across. And these are all of this on this page are acts of interpretation, where it's not simple. If a writer creates a poem, they might create a three-line poem. And here it is. This is my poem. It's called In the End, period, dash, silence. That is the entirety of my poem. Okay? It's a short poem. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. Is it boring? Is it beautiful?